At 75, Vincent believed there was nothing left that could still touch him deep inside. But a young housekeeper arrived with serene eyes and a presence that wounded in silence. And when he found himself in love, it was already too late to turn back. If you enjoy love and romance stories, watch until the end. You won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Now, let's continue. The fog covered the hills of Glenmore that winter morning, enveloping Lancaster Manor in a pale, ghostly shroud. Vincent observed the entrance gate through the window of his study, a room with dark walls lined with fine wood and books that would never be read again. His eyes, once piercing, now half covered by heavy lids, were fixed on the female silhouette emerging from the mist, carrying only a battered suitcase. "Another one who won't last a week," he muttered to himself, sipping the last of the bitter coffee that was growing cold in his trembling hands. Vincent Lancaster, 75, still carried the weight of decades of power in his name. In a London that was rapidly changing, his real estate empire remained a testament to an era when men like him built and destroyed fortunes with a single phone call. But now the empire was slowly crumbling, just like his health. The suspected cerebral aneurysm pulsed at his temples like a time bomb he refused to defuse. The doorbell rang, a mournful sound that echoed through the empty corridors of the manor. Madeline, the housekeeper who had served the family for nearly 4 decades, hurried across the entrance hall, her slippers shuffling across the cold marble. She was the only staff member left, the only one who could endure her employer's bitter temperament. "Good morning." "You must be Mr. Lancaster." The woman's voice reached Vincent's ears even before he left the study. "Madeline is the housekeeper. I am Isadora Reed, the new nurse." Vincent remained motionless, observing her from a distance. The woman entering his home looked nothing like the previous nurses, who were usually middle-aged ladies with expressions of professional pity. This one was 35 at most, with black hair tied in a simple bun, and a posture that revealed more dignity than submission. She wore simple but immaculate clothes, dark jeans, a white shirt buttoned to the neck, no makeup or adornments. "You won't last until Sunday," he said, finally emerging from the shadows of the hallway. "7 have come before you. None could stand my temper." Isadora was not intimidated. Her brown eyes, almost golden in the dim light of the hall, met his with a disconcerting serenity. "I'm not here to put up with your temper, Mr. Lancaster. I'm here to monitor your health and ensure you take your medication. What you think of me is irrelevant to my work." Vincent felt something strange, perhaps respect, perhaps irritation. No one had spoken to him in that tone for years. Not since Clara had died, not since the empire began to crumble, not since his son Robert began conspiring to take control of the remaining companies. Everyone treated him either as a tyrant to be feared or an old man to be tolerated. "Madeline, show her to her room," he ordered, turning his back. "And you, nurse, don't get comfortable. I've already called the agency to request a replacement." Isadora didn't reply. She just picked up her suitcase and followed the housekeeper up the stairs, her steps firm and controlled. The room assigned to Isadora was in the east wing of the manor, far from the master bedroom, but close enough that she could hear if Vincent needed assistance during the night. It was a spacious room, with high windows overlooking the abandoned garden. There was something melancholic about the space, the antique furniture, the faded wallpaper, the smell of a place that hadn't seen sun or visitors in a long time. "Don't mind what he said," Madeline said, helping her open the dusty windows. "The master has been like this ever since Mrs. Clara died, and it got worse when his health began to fail." "How did she die?" Isadora asked, undoing her bun and letting her black hair fall over her shoulders. The housekeeper hesitated, her eyes darting quickly to the door as if afraid of being overheard. "An accident. She fell down the main staircase. I was off that day." Madeline crossed herself. "They say she was on edge in those days. The marriage wasn't going well, but no one ever talked much about it." Isadora nodded, storing the information like a valuable piece of a puzzle. She opened her suitcase and began to meticulously arrange her few possessions, some simple clothes, basic toiletries, a small picture frame with a photo of an older woman with a tired smile, hand hidden under folded T-shirts, various medications, a stethoscope, and a blood pressure monitor. Dr. Matthews called to say he'd be coming tomorrow, Madeline informed her. He's the only doctor Mr. Vincent still respects, the only one who can get him to take his pills. I understand. I'll prepare a report on his condition for the doctor. When Madeline left, Isadora locked the door. From an inner pocket of her suitcase, she pulled out a small black-covered notebook. She sat on the edge of the bed and began to write in small, precise script. Day 1, the manor is exactly as Mum described. Vincent is older, more bitter, but still has the same arrogant look. He didn't recognize me, obviously. Why would he recognize the daughter of the cleaning lady he got pregnant and fired 33 years ago? The housekeeper mentioned Clara's accident. I need to investigate further. Her room must be somewhere in this house. I'll start exploring tomorrow. She closed the notebook and hid it inside the mattress lining. She took a deep breath, trying to control the anger that threatened to surface. She couldn't let her emotions interfere with the plan she had spent years crafting. After a quick shower, Isadora changed and went downstairs to get to know the house better. Lancaster Manor was an early 20th century construction, a mix of architectural styles that resulted in something imposing and disconcerting. Hallways opened into unexplored rooms, staircases led to abandoned wings. The fortune that had once filled every inch of the place now gave way to a silent neglect. Furniture covered with white sheets, dusty paintings, permanently closed curtains. In a ground-floor room, she found something that made her stop. A grand piano, black and glossy, stood out as the only impeccably maintained piece in the entire manor. Isadora approached slowly, almost reverently. She ran her fingers over the yellowed keys, producing a high note that seemed to awaken something dormant in the surrounding walls. No one has touched that in 30 years. Vincent's voice startled her. He was standing in the doorway, leaning on a dark wooden cane she hadn't noticed before. He seemed smaller now, less intimidating, as if the encounter with the past embodied in that instrument had diminished him. "I'm sorry, I was just exploring," she replied, moving away from the piano. "Clara used to play every night after dinner," he continued, as if he hadn't heard her. "Even when we fought, even on the worst days. It was the only thing that calmed Robert down when he was little." Vincent approached the piano, touching the polished surface with a trembling hand. "Do you know how to play?" "A little," Isadora answered, feeling a lump in her throat. "My mother taught me when I was a child. Play something." It wasn't a request, it was a command uttered with the naturalness of someone who had spent a lifetime giving orders. Isadora hesitated. Sitting at that piano felt like a profanation, an invasion, but something in Vincent's expression, perhaps the momentary vulnerability, perhaps the genuine curiosity, made her give in. She sat on the bench and positioned her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she was still feeling the weight of that instrument, of that house, of that history. Then she began to play. It wasn't an elaborate piece, just a simple, melancholic melody that her mother had taught her years ago. Vincent turned pale. His fingers tightened on the cane with such force that his knuckles turned white. "Stop," he whispered. Isadora continued, lost in the music, in her own thoughts. "Stop!" he shouted, banging his cane on the floor with force. Her hands froze on the keys. Vincent was breathing heavily, his face contorted in a mask of pain and fury. "Where did you learn that song?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I already told you. My mother taught me." "Who was your mother?" Isadora swallowed hard. It was too soon. It wasn't in her plans to reveal anything now. No one you would know. A music teacher in Yorkshire. Why? Vincent studied her for long seconds. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. He seemed about to say something, but was interrupted by the shrill ring of the telephone. Madeleine appeared quickly, answered, and handed the receiver to him. "It's Mr. Robert, sir." The mention of his son seemed to snap Vincent out of his trance. He took the phone, turned his back, and walked away to speak in private. Isadora remained seated at the piano, her hands now trembling slightly. She had been reckless. The melody had been a mistake. Her mother played that song because she had learned it in the manor. When she worked for the Lancaster family, when she got involved with Vincent, when she naively fell in love with a man who would discard her like trash upon discovering her pregnancy. Vincent returned minutes later, his expression closed, the mask of coldness back in place. "My son is coming for dinner tonight. He's a lawyer, handles my business now. He wants to meet you. That's not necessary. I'm only here as your nurse." It is necessary, he cut in. Robert insists on supervising everything that happens in this house. He thinks I'm senile, that I can no longer make my own decisions. He'll probably come with another document for me to sign, transferring some property into his name. There was bitterness in his voice, but also a resignation that surprised Isadora. This was not the Vincent Lancaster her mother had described, the ruthless man, the predator, the tycoon who destroyed competitors over breakfast. This was just a sick old man cornered by his own son, surrounded by the ghosts he himself had created. "You don't trust your son?" she asked, testing the limits. Vincent laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Robert is exactly as I was at his age. That's why I don't trust him." The rest of the day passed in a tense silence. Isadora surveyed the entire house, familiarizing herself with the exits, the main rooms, the peculiarities of a place that seemed trapped in its own time. She watched Vincent take his medication reluctantly, measured his blood pressure, dangerously high, and prepared a schedule for his next doses. That evening, while helping Madeline set the table for dinner, the housekeeper gave her some warnings in a low voice. "Mr. Robert is not like his father. Vincent was always tough but fair in his own way. The son, he smiles more, speaks more politely, but there's something in his eyes that gives me the creeps. Be careful." Isadora nodded, silently grateful for the unexpected ally. She was finishing arranging the silver cutlery when she heard the sound of a luxury car parking at the entrance. Moments later, firm footsteps crossed the hall, and a smooth, articulate male voice filled the room. Robert Lancaster was the younger, more polished version of his father. At 45, he had the same imposing height, the same defined jawline, but where Vincent was all sharp edges and hardness, the son was all studied charm and calculated smiles. He wore an impeccable suit that seemed out of place in the manor's decay. Upon seeing Isadora, his eyes, cold like his father's but much more vigilant, gleamed with interest. "So you're the new nurse," he said, extending his hand. "Robert Lancaster. I hope my father is behaving himself." "Isadora Reed," she replied, accepting the handshake with a firm, brief grip. "Your father is being cooperative considering the circumstances." Robert laughed, showing perfectly aligned teeth. "Cooperative? That's a new one." The last 6 nurses had very different opinions. Vincent entered the dining room, walking slowly with the aid of his cane. Isadora noticed how his posture changed in his son's presence. More rigid, more defensive, like a cornered animal preparing for an attack. "I didn't know you were coming for dinner," Vincent said dryly. "I thought you were too busy selling my land in Canary Wharf to the Chinese." "Father always so dramatic," Robert smiled, kissing his father on the cheek. "That was an excellent deal for the company. And I'm just here to meet Miss Reed. We need to ensure you're receiving the best care." The dinner was a performance of false cordiality. Robert dominated the conversation, alternating between seemingly innocent childhood stories and incisive questions about Isadora's training, her previous experiences, and her personal life. She responded with the story she had meticulously constructed over the years: nursing school in Leeds, a deceased mother, experience with geriatric patients, a lack of ties that allowed her to accept a live-in job. And why choose to work for a grumpy old man in the middle of the Highlands when you could be in a hospital in London? Robert asked, pouring himself more wine. "The salary is better," Isadora replied simply, "and I prefer to care for one patient at a time." Vincent, who had been watching the interrogation in silence, let out a short laugh. "At least she's honest. Money is always a good reason." Robert studied Isadora over the rim of his glass. "Still, it's curious. I did some research on you before I came, you know. Standard practice for anyone with access to my father's house. And there are some interesting gaps in your history." Isadora maintained a neutral expression, though she felt her heart race. "What kind of gaps?" "For example, I couldn't find any records of you in Leeds before 2010. It's as if you just appeared." "Robert," Vincent interrupted, banging his fork on the plate with force. "Enough of this ridiculous interrogation. She's here to check my blood pressure and give me pills. Not to be investigated like a criminal. I'm just looking out for your interests." "Father," Robert replied without taking his eyes off Isadora. "My interests?" Vincent laughed bitterly. "Since when?" "Since you started transferring my properties into your name. Since you hired that psychiatrist To declare me incompetent? Robert's face hardened for an instant, before softening again into a rehearsed smile. Let's not discuss business in front of Miss Reed. She'll think we're a dysfunctional family. Don't worry, Isadora said, standing up to clear the plates. I've worked with families far more dysfunctional than this one. After dinner, Robert insisted on speaking privately with his father in the study. Isadora took the opportunity to explore the second floor of the manor. Following the instructions she had received from her mother years ago, she easily located the room that had once belonged to Clara Lancaster. It was at the end of the widest corridor, with double doors of carved wood. She tried to open it, but it was locked. She looked around to make sure she was alone, then took a small case with lock-picking tools from her pocket, which she had brought specifically for this purpose. She had learned to pick locks years ago, a skill acquired during her obstinate search for the truth. The old lock yielded easily. Isadora pushed the door open slowly, feeling the cold, stagnant air of the closed room escape. She turned on the light and entered. Clara Lancaster's room was a time capsule. Everything remained as if its owner were about to return at any moment. The dressing table mirror with untouched perfume bottles, the closet with dresses from the 80s, the impeccably made bed. On the bedside table, a picture frame with a photo of the couple in happier times. A younger Vincent, dark hair, confident smile. Clara, a blonde woman of classic beauty, her blue eyes seeming to look through the camera with a premonitory melancholy. Isadora approached the dressing table. She opened drawers, examined documents, looking for any clue about Clara and Vincent's relationship, any mention of the woman her mother had been. In a locked drawer, which also yielded easily to her tools, she found a red leather-bound diary. She was about to open it when she heard raised voices coming from downstairs. She quickly tucked the diary into the back of her waistband, covered by the long blazer she wore, and left the room, carefully closing the door behind her. She reached the top of the stairs just in time to see Robert storming out of the study, his face red with anger. Vincent followed him, leaning heavily on his cane. "You can't do this. Think of the company, the family legacy," Robert shouted. "It's still my name on the door, my name on the documents. If I want to sell everything and donate the money to a cat shelter, that's my business. You're senile. I'll file for legal conservatorship tomorrow." "Try me," Vincent snarled. "I still have friends at the courthouse, and I have 30 years of your dirty laundry to air if you want to take me on." Robert stopped abruptly when he noticed Isadora at the top of the stairs. His gaze for an instant was one of pure hatred. Then he composed himself, adjusted his tie, and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Reed, my apologies for the family drama. As you can see, my father is emotionally unstable. I suggest you keep an eye out for any erratic behavior." Before Isadora could reply, he had already headed for the door, stepping out into the cold Glenmore night without a proper goodbye. Vincent remained standing in the hall, his breathing heavy, his hands trembling visibly. Isadora rushed down the stairs, concerned for his condition. "Mr. Lancaster, are you all right? You need to sit down. Your pressure—" "I'm fine," he cut in. But his legs gave way and he had to lean on the banister to keep from falling. Isadora put his arm over her shoulder, supporting part of his weight. "Let's go to your room. I need to take your pressure and give you your evening medication." Surprisingly, Vincent didn't protest. He let himself be guided to the master bedroom on the first floor, an austere room, dominated by an old four-poster bed and bookshelves that covered 2 entire walls. Isadora helped him sit on the edge of the bed and quickly prepared the sphygmomanometer. "Is it always like this between you two?" she asked as she inflated the cuff around his arm. Vincent remained silent for a few moments, watching her work with precise professional movements. "Not always. There was a time when he admired me. When Clara was alive, we were a real family. Afterward," he made a vague gesture with his free hand, "afterwards I became just an obstacle between him and the money." His pressure was dangerously high. Isadora prepared a fast-acting antihypertensive pill and a glass of water. What did he want this time? "For me to sign the sale of the last plot of land we have in Kensington. A plot I promised Clara I would never sell. She loved that place. We had plans to build a house there when we retired." Isadora handed him the medicine, which he took without resistance. "Do you have other children?" "Besides Robert?" A shadow crossed Vincent's face. For an instant, So brief, Isadora almost missed it. Something like deep pain flashed in his eyes. No. Only Robert. She knew he was lying. She knew more than he could imagine, but she just nodded, helping him lie down. Try to rest. I'll be in the room next door if you need anything during the night. Vincent grabbed her wrist as she moved away. The touch surprised her, not for its strength, which was minimal, but for the sudden vulnerability it conveyed. That song you played. Clara played it every night to put Robert to sleep. No one but her knew that melody. It was something she composed herself. Isadora felt a chill run down her spine. It must be a coincidence, she murmured. Simple melodies tend to repeat themselves. I don't believe in coincidences. Miss Reed. She gently removed his hand from her wrist. Good night, Mr. Lancaster. Back in her room, Isadora sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. She retrieved Clara's diary from its makeshift hiding place and caressed the red leather cover. Within those pages could be the answers she sought. The confirmation that her mother had told the truth. The proof that Vincent Lancaster was the monster she had always believed him to be. But something stopped her from opening the diary right then. The look in Vincent's eyes when he mentioned the music, the genuine pain in his voice when he spoke of Clara and his son, the fragility of this man who had once been so powerful, it all unsettled her. She had come to destroy him, to expose his crimes, to avenge her mother, not to feel compassion. She tucked the diary under the mattress along with her own notebook. Tomorrow would be another day. Tomorrow she would continue her investigation. Tomorrow she would remember who Vincent Lancaster really was, behind the facade of a sick, vulnerable old man. But that night, as the manor fell asleep under the blanket of fog that never completely left the Glenmore Hills, Isadora dreamed of a piano melody and a blonde woman with melancholic blue eyes, who smiled at her with a secret that only the two of them shared. 3 weeks had passed since Isadora's arrival at Lancaster Manor. The routine established between her and Vincent had the quality of a cautious dance. He, reluctantly accepting her care, she meticulously observing every detail that might reveal more about the man who had destroyed her mother's life. Clara's diary remained hidden under Isadora's mattress, still unopened. Something prevented her from reading it, an undefined fear that what she discovered might complicate the mission that had brought her there. Vincent's health fluctuated. There were days when he seemed stronger, walking around the property leaning only lightly on his cane, discussing literature with surprising lucidity. On others, he was struck by headaches so intense he could barely leave his bed, his skin taking on a sallow hue that concerned Isadora professionally. Despite everything, on a particularly clear morning, a rarity for Glenmore's misty microclimate, Isadora found Vincent in the back garden, sitting on a stone bench, observing what had once been a lush rose garden and was now nothing but wild, thorny bushes. Clara adored this place, he said without turning, somehow knowing it was she who was approaching. She spent hours here, even on rainy days. Said the roses spoke to her. Isadora sat beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. In recent weeks, she had noticed how Vincent seemed more prone to sharing memories, small confessions that escaped as if a dam was slowly breaking. Did you never think of hiring a gardener? To restore the place? Vincent shook his head. For what? For whom? Robert hates this house. He only comes here to try and get me to sign documents. And He paused, his eyes lost on some distant point. I don't deserve beauty around me. Not anymore. There was something in that statement, the implicit guilt, the deliberate self-punishment, that touched Isadora in a way she hadn't expected. It was easier to hate the Vincent of her imagination, the one-dimensional villain of her mother's stories, than this complex, embittered, perhaps even regretful man. Everyone deserves beauty, she replied, surprising herself, even those who have done terrible things. His eyes, still piercing despite his age, fixed on hers. You speak as if you've known me longer than these few weeks. Miss Reed, as if you know what terrible things I've done. Isadora held his gaze, feeling her heart race. She was treading on dangerous ground. Every powerful man has skeletons in his closet, especially those who built empires during the era of military dictatorships. Vincent let out a short, humorless laugh. Touché. I see you've been researching me. Just the basics. It would be irresponsible to work for someone without knowing their history. A silence settled between them, filled only by the distant sound of birds and the wind in the ancient trees surrounding the property. Vincent seemed to be considering something, debating internally whether or not to continue the conversation. "You know what's funny, Miss Reed? People assume my biggest regrets are related to business. Dubiously acquired land, bribed politicians, ruined competitors. But they're not. Business is just business." He stood up with difficulty, refusing the help she instinctively offered. "My real regrets are personal. The people I hurt, not because it was necessary, but because I could. Because it was easier. Because it was convenient." Isadora felt a lump in her throat. She thought of her mother, Grace, young and naive, in love with her boss, then abandoned, pregnant, and humiliated. And those people. Did you ever try to make it up to them in some way? Vincent began to walk slowly back to the house, leaning heavily on his cane. Some, yes, others. Some I wouldn't even know where to begin to look. That afternoon, while Vincent was taking his usual nap, Isadora finally summoned the courage to open Clara's diary. Sitting in the armchair in her room with the door locked, she began to read the first pages. Dated 1985. The initial entries were mundane: social events, shopping, minor domestic irritations. Clara wrote with a distant elegance, typical of a woman of her social class. But as the months went on, the tone changed. There were mentions of fights with Vincent, his obsession with work, his frequent absences. In August of that year, an entry caught Isadora's attention. 5. Is having an affair. It's not the first, I know that, I've always known. But this one is different. The girl is so young, probably the age I was when we met. One of the interns at the construction firm. He isn't careful. He doesn't hide it. It's as if he wants me to find out, wants me to suffer. Perhaps it's his way of punishing me for not giving him another child after Robert. As if it were my fault, as if the 3 miscarriages were a choice. Isadora's heart pounded. The intern could only be her mother, Grace. The dates matched perfectly. She kept reading, eager for more details, for any direct mention. 2 weeks later, Clara had written, "I confronted V about the girl. He denied it at first, then admitted it, but so coldly, so casually, as if he were talking about changing a car tire. It's just sex," he said. "Nothing that threatens our marriage." As if that would console me. I asked if he loved her. He laughed. "Love? She's a girl from the country. No education, no class. You think I would trade all this for someone like that?" I don't know what hurt more, his betrayal or his contempt for her, because I can see it in her eyes when she comes to the house to deliver documents. She loves him. Poor girl. Isadora's hands were trembling now. Clara's words captured exactly what her mother had told her years later, how she had been seduced, used and then discarded by Vincent, how he had pretended not to know her when she showed up months later, visibly pregnant, begging for help. She continued turning the pages, weeks turning into months. In November, Clara wrote, "The girl doesn't come around anymore." I asked V, he shrugged, said she'd quit. "One less problem," was all he said. But yesterday, Madeleine mentioned something strange, that she saw her at the back of the house trying to talk to me. When I asked V, he exploded, said I was obsessed, that if I mentioned that tramp again, he'd have me committed to a sanatorium. Something is wrong. Something he doesn't want me to know. And then in December, the entry that made Isadora freeze. I found out everything. The girl is pregnant, with V's child. He fired her when he found out, paid her a sum to disappear. She tried to find me to ask for help, but the security guards stopped her. I confronted V today. The argument was terrible. He broke things, threatened me. Said that if I helped that gold digger, he would destroy me, take Robert from me. Then he left drunk, driving like a madman. I'm afraid. Not of him. I stopped fearing him a long time ago. I'm afraid of what I've become. A silent accomplice. I have to find this young woman. I have to help her. The baby is Robert's half-sibling, for God's sake. It's an innocent child. Isadora shut the diary abruptly, unable to continue. Hot tears ran down her face. Clara Lancaster was not the villain she had imagined, the rich, privileged wife who had turned a blind eye to her husband's transgressions. She had been a woman trapped in her own private hell who had tried to help her mother. But something didn't make sense. If Clara had discovered the pregnancy in December and died in January, What had happened in that interval? And why had her mother never mentioned that Clara had tried to help her? She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. When the doorknob turned, she jumped, quickly hiding the diary under the armchair cushion. It was Madeline, her face worried. "Miss Isadora, Dr. Matthews is here. Mr. Vincent is not well at all." Isadora quickly followed the housekeeper to the master bedroom, where she found Vincent lying down, his face contorted in a mask of pain, and Dr. Matthews, a man in his 60s, with grey hair and a grave expression, examining him. "The nurse," the doctor said upon seeing her. "Has he had any episodes of high blood pressure in the last 24 hours?" "No more than usual," Isadora replied, approaching the bed. "What happened?" "Possible TIA, transient ischemic attack. A mini-stroke in layman's terms. I found him confused, having trouble articulating words, weakness on his left side. The symptoms are already subsiding, which is characteristic of a TIA, but it's a serious warning." Vincent tried to sit up, but was gently held down by the doctor. "It was nothing," he muttered, his voice slurred. "Just a dizzy spell." "It wasn't just a dizzy spell, my old friend," Dr. Matthews said firmly. "It was your body screaming that you need to take things seriously. The blood pressure, the medication, the aneurysm you refuse to have operated on." Isadora felt a chill at the mention of the aneurysm. In all these weeks, Vincent had never mentioned such a condition, though she had suspected it from his symptoms and the medications he took. "Aneurysm?" she asked, looking from Vincent to the doctor. Dr. Matthews sighed. "He didn't tell you, I presume. Vincent has a sizable cerebral aneurysm. We detected it 6 months ago. Surgery is recommended, but he flatly refuses to have it." "I'm not letting anyone cut open my head," Vincent grumbled. "If I'm going to die, let it be all at once." The doctor rolled his eyes, clearly used to his patient's stubbornness. "Well, you were lucky this time. But the next episode might not be just a warning." He turned to Isadora. "I'm going to change his medication. And he needs constant monitoring. Any sign of confusion, one-sided weakness, difficulty speaking, call me immediately and call an ambulance." After the doctor left, Isadora helped Vincent get more comfortable in bed. There was something disturbingly intimate about adjusting his pillows, checking his temperature by touching his forehead, holding a glass of water for him to drink when his hands trembled too much. "Why didn't you tell me about the aneurysm?" she asked, adjusting the drip on the IV the doctor had set up. Vincent looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because it's not relevant." "How is it not relevant?" "It's a potentially fatal condition." "Exactly," he smiled faintly. "Fatal. In other words, the solution to many problems." The frankness of that answer caught her off guard. She was used to Vincent's rudeness, his bitterness, but not this so openly declared death wish. "You want to die?" "Want is a strong word," he replied, looking at the ceiling. "Let's just say I no longer care about living. There's a subtle difference there." Isadora pulled the armchair closer to the bed and sat down. For the first time since she had arrived, she allowed herself to look at Vincent not as the villain of her mother's story, not as the patient she needed to monitor, but as a man. An elderly sick man, apparently consumed by regrets he couldn't or didn't know how to fix. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. "What made the great Vincent Lancaster give up on life?" He turned his face to her, his eyes suddenly more lucid, more present. "You happened." Isadora's heart skipped a beat. Did he know? Had he discovered who she was? "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You, not you specifically, but people like you." Vincent made a vague gesture with his hand. "People who come into my life now at the end and make me remember everything I've lost, everything I've wasted." He tried to reach for the glass of water on the bedside table. Isadora quickly stood up to help him. Their fingers brushed briefly over the glass. An accidental, insignificant touch, but something ran down Isadora's spine. An electric current, an alarm. Because for an instant, a single terrible instant, she didn't feel revulsion. She felt something else. She recoiled abruptly, spilling a few drops of water on the sheet. "Sorry," she murmured, avoiding his eyes. "I'll go get your new medications from the pharmacy. Madeleine will stay with you while I'm out." She left the room quickly, her heart pounding. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, trying to regain control. What was happening to her? This man had destroyed her mother's life. He was responsible for the deprived childhood she'd had, for the depression that had consumed Grace until her premature death. He was the villain of the story, her enemy, the person she had come to destroy. But now, seeing him weakened, listening to his confessions, reading Clara's diary, and discovering nuances her mother had never mentioned, everything was becoming more complicated. And complicated was dangerous. Complicated could make her lose sight of her goal. At the pharmacy in the small hillside town, while waiting for the medications to be prepared, Isadora called Richard, the only accomplice in her plan. Richard was an investigative journalist, specializing in cases of corporate corruption during the military dictatorship. He had been the one to help her create a false identity, get the nursing documents, and infiltrate Vincent's house. "How's the mission going?" he asked after the initial greetings. "It's complicated," Isadora replied, making sure no one in the pharmacy could hear her. "I found the wife's diary. She knew about my mother, about the pregnancy. Apparently she tried to help." "Interesting. And what about Vincent? Found anything we can use in the dossier?" Isadora hesitated. "Not yet. He's different from what we expected. More complex." Richard let out an impatient sigh. "Isadora, don't be fooled. Men like Vincent Lancaster are masters of manipulation. Of course he's going to seem vulnerable, regretful. It's part of the game. I know, but no buts. Remember what he did to your mother, what he did to dozens of other people. The workers who died in that accident in '85 that was covered up. The residents of Canning Row who were forcibly evicted to make way for luxury condos." "I haven't forgotten," Isadora said, feeling her original determination return. "I just need more time. The son is suspicious, and Vincent had a stroke today." "A stroke? Is he in bad shape?" "It was a minor one, a warning, but he has an unoperated cerebral aneurysm." Richard was silent for a few seconds. "That could be useful. If his health is deteriorating, it might be time to act. Before it's too late." "What do you mean?" "The will, Isadora. We need to know what's in his will. If he dies before officially recognizing you as his daughter, you won't be entitled to anything." Isadora felt a bitter taste in her mouth. "I'm not doing this for the money." "It's not about the money. It's about justice. And what justice would it be if the legitimate son, who from what you say is just as bad as the father, inherits everything? Think of the reparations for your mother, the good you could do with that money." The pharmacy assistant called her name, handing her a bag with the medications. Isadora quickly said goodbye to Richard, promising to keep in touch. During the drive back to the manor, her emotions swung like a pendulum. Richard was right. She couldn't lose sight of the reason she had come here. Revenge, justice, reparation. She couldn't allow a strange compassion for Vincent. Or worse, a disturbing attraction she couldn't even admit to herself, to divert her from her path. When she arrived, she found Robert in the entrance hall, in a tense conversation with Madeline. "The nurse," he said, the smile not reaching his cold eyes. "I was just asking Madeline where you were. Did my father have another episode?" "A transient ischemic attack," Isadora replied, maintaining a professional tone. "Dr. Matthews was here. He changed the medication." "Your father is stable now. How convenient." "I'm sorry." Robert moved closer, deliberately invading her personal space. "I said it's convenient. My father, alone in this isolated house, having frequent episodes, with only you and an elderly housekeeper to witness it." "Are you implying something, Mr. Lancaster?" "I'm not implying anything." His smile was now openly hostile. "I'm saying it directly. I don't trust you. There's something wrong with this story, and I'm going to find out what it is." "Your concern for your father is touching," Isadora replied, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. "Especially considering you rarely visit him, except to ask him to sign documents." Robert's face hardened. "You know nothing about our relationship. I know enough to see that it's based on self-interest." "And yours isn't?" He laughed, a cold, calculated sound. "A young, beautiful nurse taking care of a sick, millionaire old man. It wouldn't be the first time we've seen this movie, would it?" Before Isadora could respond, Vincent appeared at the top of the stairs, leaning heavily on the banister. "Already poisoning my nurse's ears, Robert?" "You shouldn't be on your feet, sir," she interrupted herself, addressing Vincent. Madeline told me you two were about to draw your weapons, so I thought I'd better intervene. Vincent began to descend the steps slowly. And don't tell me what to do in my own house, Miss Reed. Isadora and Robert both rushed to help him, resulting in an awkward moment when they both offered support at the same time. Vincent accepted Isadora's arm, a small gesture that did not go unnoticed by Robert, whose eyes narrowed dangerously. I came as soon as I heard about your accident, Robert said, following them into the living room. It wasn't an accident, Vincent retorted, as Isadora helped him sit in his favorite armchair. It was a warning from my body that I'm old and sick. Nothing you don't already know and are counting on. Father, don't... Start. Start what? Telling truths? You think I don't know you're waiting for me to die to get your hands on what's left of my money? Isadora intervened, uncomfortable with the turn the conversation was taking. Mr. Lancaster, you need to take your medication. And the doctor recommended complete rest. See? Vincent said to Robert with a sarcastic smile. At least someone in this house cares if I live or die. Robert took a deep breath as if searching for patience. I didn't come to argue, Father. I came to bring the papers for the new will you asked Dr. Harold for. Isadora felt her heart race. A new will? That could change everything. Leave them on the table, Vincent replied, making a vague gesture. I'll read them when I'm feeling better. It's not that simple. Harold wants me to explain some clauses personally, to make sure you understand all the legal implications. Legal implications? Vincent laughed harshly. The legal implication is that I'm giving half of what I have left to charities and the other half to whomever I please, and you can't do a thing about it. Robert's face turned red, but he maintained his composure. That's a conversation for another time when you're better. For now, I just want to ensure you're receiving proper care. He turned to Isadora. Miss Reed, may I speak with you in private? Isadora hesitated, glancing at Vincent, who nodded affirmatively. Go on. And don't worry, I'm not going to faint in the next 5 minutes. She followed Robert into Vincent's study, an imposing room with a large carved mahogany desk and walls covered with photos of the Lancaster family in better times. Robert closed the door and faced her directly. How much do you want? Isadora blinked, confused. What? To leave my father alone. How much do you want? She almost laughed at the irony of the situation. Here was Vincent's son, offering her money to go away, not knowing she was, in fact, his half-sister. I'm not here for the money. Mr. Lancaster, I'm here to do my job. Please, he scoffed. Let's skip that part. A young, attractive woman like you doesn't choose to spend her days wiping the drool off a sick old man in an isolated mansion without an ulterior motive. You have a very cynical view of the world. Realistic. I grew up watching people like you orbit my father, looking to take advantage. But this is different. He's vulnerable, confused, and you're poisoning him against me. Isadora crossed her arms, holding his gaze without flinching. If your father has reservations about you... They began long before I arrived. Robert moved closer, his face inches from hers. Listen carefully. I don't know what you want. I don't know what game you're playing. But I can make your life very difficult. I have resources, I have influence. I can investigate every inch of your past until I find something that will destroy you. Are you threatening me? I'm being pragmatic. Name your price. Everyone has one. Isadora felt a cold anger rise up her spine. This man, this privileged heir who had never had to fight for anything, believed he could buy her, intimidate her, just as his father had probably believed he could buy her mother's silence decades ago. My price, she said slowly, is for you to leave this office now and let me do my job. Your father needs care, not additional stress. Robert smiled, a cold, calculated smile. You're good, Miss Reed, really good, but you're not good enough. He walked to the door, stopping before he left. Oh, and just so you know, that new will my father mentioned, it's not going to happen. We've already started the legal conservatorship proceedings. Soon, very soon, I'll be making all the decisions, including who works in this house. When he was gone, Isadora allowed herself a moment of weakness, leaning on Vincent's desk as her heart slowed. Robert's threat was real. If he got the conservatorship, if he took legal control, all would be lost. Not just her chance for revenge or reparation, but the very possibility of Vincent knowing the truth before he died. She returned to the living room to find Vincent still sitting in the armchair, looking out the window at the abandoned garden. He looked older now, more fragile, as if the conversation with his son had drained what was left of his energy. "Let me guess," he said without turning. "He offered you money to leave." Isadora approached, adjusting the blanket over his legs. "Something like that." "And why didn't you take it?" "It would be the sensible thing to do." She stopped, facing him directly. "Because I'm not here for the money." "Then why are you here, Isadora?" It was the first time he had called her by her first name, without the formal Miss Reed. The sudden intimacy disarmed her. "I've already told you." "I'm here to do my job." "No, you're not." Vincent turned to face her, his eyes suddenly lucid and piercing. "You're here for some other reason. I may not be the man I once was, but I can still recognize when someone has a hidden agenda." Isadora felt her blood run cold. Was she that transparent? "You're confused. A side effect of the ischemic attack. It's normal to have temporary paranoia. I'm not confused or paranoid. I'm seeing clearly, perhaps for the first time in years." He reached out, surprising her by gently touching her face. "Who are you really, Isadora? What do you want from me?" His touch was warm, dry, unexpectedly gentle. Isadora remained motionless, torn between the impulse to recoil in horror and the strange, unsettling urge to lean into the caress. "I'm exactly who I said I am," she replied, her voice huskier than she intended. Vincent let his hand fall slowly. "Liar," he said, but without anger, almost with affection. "But that's all right. We all have our secrets, don't we?" That night, after helping Vincent to bed, after checking his vitals and administering the new medications, Isadora retired to her room. She felt exhausted, emotionally drained. The conversation with Robert, Vincent's insinuations, the partial reading of Clara's diary, it all swirled in her mind, forming a confusing vortex. She took a long shower, trying to organize her thoughts. When she emerged, wrapped in a fluffy robe, an unexpected sight awaited her. Vincent was sitting in the armchair in her room, Clara's diary open in his hands. "Interesting reading, isn't it?" he asked, without lifting his eyes from the page. "Especially for someone who claims not to have known me before arriving here." Isadora froze, unable to form a coherent response. How had he gotten in? How had he found the diary? Why wasn't he in bed, too weak to walk without support just hours ago? How did I find out? Vincent finally looked at her, and there was something different in his eyes. Not anger, not accusation, but a kind of sad acceptance. "You've been visiting Clara's room. The perfumes are in a different order. The drawers of the dressing table have been disturbed. And this afternoon, while you were at the pharmacy, I found this under your mattress." He held up another object, Isadora's black notebook, where she had written down her plans, her thoughts, her true identity. "I knew there was something familiar about you from the first moment," he continued, his voice calm, almost gentle. "The eyes. They're the same as your mother's." Isadora felt her legs weaken. She leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "You knew?" "Not immediately. But I suspected. And now I'm sure." Vincent placed the diary and the notebook on the bed. "You are Grace's daughter. You are my daughter." The words hung in the air between them, heavy as lead. After years of imagining this moment, planning her revenge, rehearsing what she would say when she finally confronted Vincent with the truth, Isadora found herself speechless. Because in none of her imagined scenarios did Vincent say those words with tears in his eyes. "I'm not your daughter," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "I'm the daughter of the woman you used and discarded. The woman you left in poverty. The woman who died without ever receiving a penny from you, an apology, an acknowledgement." Vincent bowed his head. "I know." His voice was almost a whisper. "There are no excuses for what I did, no justifications. I was someone else back then, cruel, selfish, a monster. And that's supposed to make me feel better." Isadora felt the anger rising, decades of hurt finally finding an outlet. "Do you know what my childhood was like? Do you know how many times we were evicted? How many nights we went hungry? Do you know how my mother died? Alone, depressed, destroyed by the man she loved and who treated her like trash." The tears were flowing freely down her face now. Vincent remained motionless in the armchair, accepting every word like a deserved blow. "I know words are useless now," he said, when she finally fell silent. But there's something you need to know, something your mother may never have found out. He stood up with difficulty and walked towards her, maintaining a respectful distance. I looked for you. Years later, when Clara died, when I lost everything that mattered, when I finally understood the monster I had become, I tried to find you both. I hired private detectives. I searched all over the country. But Grace had changed her name, her city. You had disappeared. Isadora laughed bitterly. Lies, you never cared. I don't expect you to believe me. Why would you? But it's true. He gestured towards the door. Come with me. There's something I need to show you. After a moment's hesitation, Isadora followed him down the dark corridor to the study. There, Vincent opened a small safe built into the wall behind a painting, a movie cliché that would have made her laugh under other circumstances. From inside, he took out an old folder and handed it to her. Inside, Isadora found reports from private detectives dated from 1995 to 2010. Blurry photos of women who vaguely resembled her mother. Lists of addresses, schools, hospitals. A systematic, obstinate search that had lasted for years. And even more surprising, dozens of letters. Handwritten letters from Vincent, addressed to my daughter, all unsent, all dated from different times over the past 20 years. I wrote them even without knowing if I would ever deliver them, he explained, watching her flip through the pages with trembling hands. It was my form of penance, of keeping alive the hope that one day I could, if not correct what I did, at least ask for forgiveness. Isadora felt stunned. Everything she had believed, everything that had motivated her life for the past few years, was being turned upside down. Vincent was not the one-dimensional monster she had imagined. He was something more complex, more human, sadder. Why are you showing me this now? She asked, her voice choked. Why didn't you confront me as soon as you found out who I was? Vincent smiled sadly. Because I wanted you to have the chance to do what you came here to do, to get your revenge if that's what you needed to move on. And what if I had come to kill you? Then I would have died at the hands of the only person with the moral right to take my life. A heavy silence fell between them. Isadora looked at the letters in her hands, at the investigation reports, at the frail man before her, so different from the monster that had populated her nightmares since childhood. I don't know what to do with this, she finally admitted. I don't know how to process all of this. You don't have to decide anything now, Vincent replied softly. You have every right to hate me, to continue with your plans, whatever they may be. I only ask one thing. What? That you read the letters. All of them. Not to forgive me, I don't deserve forgiveness, but to understand that despite everything, you were always loved. Even from a distance, even without knowing where you were, even without ever having known you, I loved you, in the only way a broken man like me could love. Isadora felt something break inside her, a dam that had held back years of anger, of hurt, of unanswered questions. The tears came uncontrollably, shaking her body in painful sobs. And then something unexpected happened. Vincent approached hesitantly, and with infinite care, like someone touching a wild creature that might flee at any moment, he wrapped her in a hug. It was the first time they had touched like this, the first time he had hugged her. And even knowing who he was, what he had done, Isadora couldn't push him away, because that hug carried 32 years of absence, because despite everything, this was her father. In that moment, in the silence of the study, under the dim light of a single lamp, something irrevocably changed between them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe never. It wasn't love, it was too soon, too complicated. It was something more primitive, more fundamental. It was recognition. And for now, on that night, it was enough. The revelation transformed everything. In the days that followed that night in the study, Isadora and Vincent entered a new dynamic, not of nurse and patient, not of vengeful daughter and negligent father, but of two strangers trying, hesitantly, to find some kind of connection amidst the rubble of 3 decades of absence. It was strange, uncomfortable, at times painful. The wounds were too deep to be healed by mere words or gestures. There were moments when Isadora still felt the anger pulse like a living entity inside her. Moments when Vincent would withdraw, unable to look her in the eye, crushed by the weight of his guilt. But there were also, surprisingly, moments of quiet, of peace, of answered questions and shared stories. Isadora told him about her childhood in Yorkshire, about how her mother worked 2 jobs to support them, about how Grace never spoke ill of Vincent. Despite everything, she only told me the truth on her deathbed, Isadora explained on a rainy afternoon, as they both had tea in the Manor's conservatory. Until then, all I knew was that my father had died before I was born. Vincent watched the rain beat against the glass panes, his face marked by a silent pain. Why do you think she lied all those years? Isadora considered the question for a few moments. At first, probably to protect me, to keep me from growing up with anger, with bitterness. She paused, sifting through old memories. But later, I think it was pride. She didn't want to be seen as a victim. Or maybe she hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe, despite everything, she still loved him. And she didn't want me to hate him. Vincent closed his eyes, visibly disturbed. I didn't deserve her. Not her, not you. A silence settled between them, filled only by the sound of the rain. Finally, Isadora asked the question that had been tormenting her since the revelation. Why didn't you want to know about the pregnancy? Why did you fire her when you found out she was expecting your child? Vincent opened his eyes, staring at her with an intensity that almost made her recoil. I didn't know, Isadora. I swear on my life I didn't know she was pregnant when I fired her. That doesn't make sense. My mother told me. Your mother probably told you what she believed to be the truth, but I only found out about the pregnancy months later, through Clara. Isadora felt her stomach sink. Was it possible? Had her mother been wrong all this time? Explain, she requested, her voice trembling. Vincent took a deep breath as if preparing to dive into dark, icy waters. Grace and I... It was a brief, intense affair, forbidden for all the obvious reasons. I was married, I was her boss, there was a significant age difference. He paused, searching for the right words. I won't insult your intelligence by saying I loved her. It was desire, it was ego. It was the power of having a beautiful young woman admire me. But for her, his voice broke. For her, I believe it was genuine love. The kind of idealistic love you only have in your youth. Isadora remained silent, absorbing every word. When Clara found out, and eventually she did, of course, I had to choose. My marriage, my son, my social standing, or an affair with an intern. I chose what seemed sensible at the time. I ended the affair, and yes, I fired Grace. It was cruel, it was cowardly. But I swear I didn't know she was pregnant. So when did you find out? Months later, Clara confronted me. She said Grace had tried to talk to her, that she was pregnant, desperate. Vincent covered his face with his hands. I didn't believe it. I thought it was a scam, an attempt at extortion. Back then I was someone else, the kind of man who assumed the worst of people. I told Clara to ignore her, not to get involved. And that was it? You just ignored it? Not exactly. Vincent looked increasingly uncomfortable. I asked one of my security guards to keep her away, to make sure she didn't bother us again. Isadora felt bile rise in her throat. You had her threatened. Your own... She couldn't finish the sentence. It wasn't an explicit order to threaten her, but yes, the intention was to get rid of her for good. Intimidate her if necessary. Vincent finally raised his gaze, meeting the horror in his daughter's eyes directly. As I said, I was a monster. The anger Isadora thought she was beginning to control erupted again, and later, when Clara died, when you supposedly had this moral epiphany. Why didn't you look for us immediately? I tried, but you had already disappeared. Grace changed her name, her city. You went to Yorkshire, from what I understand, and by the time I finally had the resources to hire serious investigators, years had passed. The trail was cold. Isadora stood up abruptly, unable to continue the conversation. She needed airspace distance from this man who, despite his apparent changes, still carried the weight of unforgivable actions. Isadora, please. No, that's enough for today. She walked to the door, stopping only to add, keep taking your medicine. I'll be back to check your pressure before bed. She took refuge in her room, locking the door and leaning against it, as if she feared Vincent would follow. But she knew he wouldn't. If she had learned anything in these weeks, it was that despite everything, Vincent respected her boundaries, her space, her anger. On her bed were spread the letters he had written over the years, letters to a daughter he didn't know, whom he didn't know if he would ever find. She had read them all one by one in the nights following the revelation. The first was dated 1995, 2 years after Clara's death. My daughter. I don't even know if I should call you that. What right do I have? None. But you exist somewhere in the world, and I dream of the day I can look into your eyes, even if it's only to see in them the reflection of my own failure as a man. Your mother's name was Grace. She was beautiful, kind, a dreamer. She deserved better than to cross my path. And you, daughter, I do not know, deserved a better father than me. A man who would be there for your first steps, your first words, your dreams and fears. Today I began to look for you. I've hired people to find you, you and your mother. I don't know what I will say when I find you, if I ever do. Perhaps it's for the best. Perhaps you are happier not knowing you have a father like me. Still, I cannot stop looking. Is it selfishness? Probably. One more in a long list of selfish acts. But I must at least try to correct this mistake. Of all the mistakes I have made, and there were many, abandoning you was the most unforgivable. So I will search, and I will wait. And in the meantime, I will write these letters that you may never read, because I need to believe that one day there will be redemption, even for a man like me. Your father, Vincent. Subsequent letters followed the same tone: regret, guilt, fragile hope. Some reported failures in the search. Others speculated about what her life was like, what kind of person she was becoming. In one, particularly painful, Vincent wrote about Clara's cancer and how in her final days she had made him promise to find the daughter he'd had out of wedlock. Find her, Clara told me the night before she died. Find her and give her everything she was denied. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because every child deserves to be loved. Because perhaps in loving her, you will learn to forgive yourself. Clara was always better than me. She always knew how to forgive. I do not have that gift. I cannot forgive my parents for the coldness they taught me. I cannot forgive the partners who betrayed me. I cannot forgive Robert for becoming just like me. And above all, I cannot forgive myself for abandoning you. But I will try. For Clara, for you, I will try to find you, and if you will let me, I will try to be the father I never was. Isadora wiped away the tears that were silently streaming down her face. The letters seemed sincere, painfully sincere, but they could be an elaborate manipulation. Vincent was, after all, a man who had spent his life manipulating people, situations, truths. She needed to talk to someone who could help her see clearly through this fog of conflicting emotions. She picked up her phone and called Richard, her accomplice in the original plan for revenge. "We need to talk," she said as soon as he answered. "Everything's changed. Did he find out who you are?" "Yes, or rather he already suspected. He found my diary, my notes. My God, Isadora. Are you okay? Did he threaten you? Do you want me to come get you?" "No, it's nothing like that. He showed me letters. Letters he wrote to me over the years. Reports from private detectives he hired to find me. He says he didn't know I existed until Clara, his wife, told him. He says he looked for me for years." A silence stretched on the other end of the line. "And you believe him?" Richard finally asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "I don't know. Maybe. The letters seem genuine. The detective reports are detailed, spanning years of searches." "Isadora," Richard sighed heavily. "I don't mean to be insensitive, but have you considered that all of this could be forged? That he might have written those letters recently, fabricated those reports?" The possibility had crossed her mind, of course, but something inside her resisted the idea. Why? What would be the purpose? To manipulate you, obviously. To disarm your anger. To present himself as a regretful old man who deserves forgiveness and compassion, not justice. You haven't seen him, Richard. The way he talks, the way he acts. It doesn't seem like an act. Are you listening to yourself? Richard's voice took on a worried tone. "Are you defending the man who destroyed your mother's life? The man you swore to expose? The man you spent years planning to confront?" Isadora closed her eyes, feeling the weight of that truth. "I know. It's complicated. He's sick, Richard. Really sick. He had another episode last night, could barely breathe. And his son, Robert," she hesitated. "I think he's up to something. He mentioned conservatorship proceedings. All the more reason to act quickly. If Vincent is legally incapacitated, you lose any chance of being recognized as his daughter. You lose any right to the inheritance, to the reparation your mother deserved. I'm not doing this for the money. No, you're doing it for justice. And what justice would there be in leaving everything in the hands of a son who, from what you say yourself, is just as bad as the father? Isadora didn't answer immediately. Richard's words were sensible, logical. They were exactly what she would have said herself weeks ago. But something had changed. "I need more time," she finally said. "I need to be sure. Time is what we don't have. If he's as sick as you say, if the son is about to have him declared incompetent, please, Richard, just a few more weeks." A resigned sigh on the other end. "All right, but don't let him manipulate you, Isadora. Remember who he is, what he's done." After hanging up, Isadora remained sitting on her bed, surrounded by Vincent's letters, feeling more confused than ever. Was she being manipulated, or was she finally seeing beyond the villain's mask she had constructed for her father her entire life? She didn't have much time to reflect. Urgent knocks on her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Miss Isadora!" It was Madeleine's voice, tense and alarmed. "Come quickly. The master has fallen." Isadora ran to Vincent's room, her heart pounding. She found him on the bathroom floor, semi-conscious, a trickle of blood running from his right nostril. Madeleine was kneeling beside him, holding his head. "He went to take a shower by himself, insisted he didn't need help," the housekeeper explained in tears. "When I heard the thud, I came running. Call Dr. Matthews now." Isadora took control, checking Vincent's vital signs. His pressure was dangerously high, his breathing irregular. His eyes were unfocused, the right pupil more dilated than the left. Classic signs of increased intracranial pressure. The aneurysm, she thought with dread. It's rupturing. "Vincent," she called, holding his face in her hands. "Vincent, look at me. Stay with me." He blinked slowly, trying to focus his eyes on her. "Isa." His voice was a hoarse, almost inaudible whisper. "Sorry, don't talk. Save your energy. The ambulance is on its way." With Madeleine's help, they managed to move him to the bed. Isadora quickly prepared an emergency antihypertensive injection, part of the kit Dr. Matthews had left for critical situations. She administered the medication directly into his vein, constantly monitoring his vitals. Within 20 minutes that felt like hours, the doctor arrived, accompanied by a team of paramedics. After a quick assessment, he confirmed Isadora's fear. The aneurysm is leaking. It's not a full rupture yet, which explains why he's still conscious. But we need to get him to the hospital immediately for emergency surgery. "He always refused to have the surgery," Isadora said, helping the paramedics place him on the stretcher. "There's no choice now," the doctor replied gravely. "It's either surgery or death." As they prepared Vincent for transport, he grabbed Isadora's hand with surprising strength. "Don't let Robert," he murmured, his eyes now more lucid, focused intensely on hers. "Don't let him—" "I won't," she promised, not knowing exactly what she was promising. "I'll be with you. I won't leave your side." On the way to the hospital, in the back of the ambulance, Isadora kept her hand firmly clasped in Vincent's. Something had shifted inside her. The anger, the hurt, the thirst for revenge. It all seemed distant now, replaced by a primal fear of losing this man she had just found. This man who, despite everything, was her father. At the hospital, as they prepared Vincent for emergency surgery, Isadora was approached by a nurse with authorization forms. "Are you a relative?" she asked. Isadora hesitated for only a second. "I'm his daughter." The nurse nodded, handing her the papers. "I need you to sign here, authorizing the procedure. It's a high-risk surgery, especially considering the patient's age." Isadora signed without hesitation. She had no legal authority to do so. She was not officially recognized as Vincent's daughter. But in that moment it didn't matter. What mattered was that he survive. She was finishing filling out the forms when Robert burst into the waiting room, his face contorted in a mixture of concern and fury. "What the hell is going on?" "Madeleine called me saying my father had an emergency. Leaking cerebral aneurysm," Isadora replied, remaining calm despite his obvious hostility. "He's being prepped for emergency surgery." "And who authorized that?" "I'm his only legal next of kin." "I authorized it," she replied, holding his gaze without flinching, as the nurse responsible for his care, in the absence of an immediate relative. Robert narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "That's irregular. I'm going to speak with the doctor. Demand they wait for my formal authorization." "If we wait, he dies," Isadora replied, her voice as sharp as steel. Is that what you want, Robert? For your father to die so you can finally get your hands on the inheritance? Something flickered across his face. Perhaps guilt, perhaps just surprise at her brutal frankness. Don't be ridiculous. Of course I want him to survive. But things need to be done correctly, legally. Legally, Isadora repeated bitterly. Like the conservatorship proceedings you're filing against him. Without his knowledge. Robert paled slightly. That's none of your business. And they are necessary measures considering his mental state. His mental state is perfectly fine. It's his physical health that's compromised. Before Robert could reply, Dr. Matthews appeared, still in his office coat, having come straight to the hospital after the emergency call. Mr. Lancaster, glad you're here. Your father is being taken into surgery right now. The neurosurgery team has been assembled. Doctor, I have reservations about this procedure, Robert began. My father always refused to have surgery. We're not sure this would be his wish. The doctor looked at him with clear disapproval. There is no choice, Mr. Lancaster. Without the surgery, your father will die within hours. With the surgery, he has approximately a 60% chance of survival, considering his age and overall health. Even so, I'd like to consult our lawyer before. There's no time for legal consultations. Dr. Matthews interrupted, his patience clearly worn thin. Your father needs the surgery now. Miss Reed has already authorized the procedure as his designated healthcare proxy, which is perfectly legal in an emergency. Designated proxy? Robert looked at Isadora with renewed suspicion. Since when? Since your father signed the papers 2 weeks ago, she replied, holding the lie with a firm gaze. Precisely in anticipation of a situation like this, considering you're rarely available. It was a lie, of course, but one that could buy precious time. Time that Vincent desperately needed. Robert looked like he was about to protest, but the doctor had already withdrawn to oversee the surgery preparation. He and Isadora were left alone in the waiting room, the air thick with tension. I don't know who you really are or what you want, he finally said, his voice low and controlled. But one thing is certain. When this is over, you will be out of that house. And if my father survives, I will make sure he never sees you again. Isadora stepped closer to him, her eyes locked on his. You have no idea what you're talking about, Robert. You have no idea who I am. Then tell me. Who are you? A con artist? A fortune hunter? What do you want from my father? The moment had come. The moment Isadora had imagined so many times, in so many different ways. The moment to reveal her true identity. My name is Isadora Grace. My mother worked for your father in the 90s as an intern at the construction firm. They had an affair. She got pregnant. He fired her, pushed her away. Robert's face transformed into a mask of shock and disbelief. You're claiming to be... Your half-sister, yes. The daughter Vincent had out of wedlock. The daughter he searched for years after your mother died. The daughter he never found. Until now. Robert staggered back as if he'd been physically struck. Impossible, he muttered. You're lying. This is some kind of elaborate scam. It's not a scam. It's the truth. Ask Madeleine. She was there. She remembers my mother. Or better yet, ask your father if he survives the surgery. And you expect me to believe that after all these years, you coincidentally showed up as his nurse? With no ulterior motives. Isadora hesitated. This was the hardest part to admit. It wasn't a coincidence. I came with a purpose. I came to confront him, to make him pay for what he did to my mother. So you admit you're a fraud? That you forged nursing credentials? That you infiltrated our home with malicious intent? I admit I came with anger, with a thirst for justice. But I never forged my credentials. I am a qualified nurse with a specialization in geriatrics. I cared for your father professionally and properly, regardless of my personal feelings. Robert seemed to be trying to process it all, his expression shifting between shock, disbelief, and calculation. Even if it's true, and I'm not saying I believe you, what do you hope to gain now? Recognition? A piece of the inheritance? At first, maybe. But now... Isadora looked towards the double doors leading to the operating theater, where Vincent was fighting for his life. Now I just want him to survive. I just want the chance to really know him, to understand who he is beyond the monster I imagined my whole life. Something in the sincerity of those words seemed to reach Robert. He studied her for long seconds, perhaps noticing for the first time the subtle resemblance to Vincent, the same intense eyes, the same shape of the face. "You look like him," he finally said, his voice softer. "I should have seen it before." Isadora didn't reply. She didn't know how to. She had never thought of herself as looking like Vincent. She had always seen herself as a replica of her mother. The idea of carrying his physical traits was both unsettling and strangely comforting. "If he survives," Robert continued, "I'm going to demand a DNA test. If you really are who you say you are," he left the sentence hanging, "if I am who I say I am, then we will have a lot to talk about." The surgery lasted 7 hours. 7 hours during which Isadora and Robert remained in the waiting room, each in a corner, rarely exchanging more than essential words. Madeleine joined them in the 3rd hour, bringing coffee and sandwiches that neither of them could eat. In the 4th hour, Richard called Isadora. She stepped out to take the call away from Robert's hearing. "How is he?" Richard asked, his voice full of a concern that Isadora knew was genuine despite everything. "In surgery. The aneurysm started to leak." "It's serious, Richard. Very serious. I'm on my way to Glenmore. You don't have to go through this alone." "That's not necessary. In fact, I think it's better if you don't come." "Why?" Isadora hesitated, knowing that what she said next would change everything between them. "Because I told Robert the truth about who I am. And because," she took a deep breath, "because we're not going through with the plan anymore." "What? Isadora, are you thinking clearly?" This man is my father, Richard. And as complicated, as painful as that is, as much anger as I still feel, I can't expose him publicly. I can't destroy him." Richard was silent for a long moment. "You're being manipulated," he finally said. "Don't you see? This is exactly what he wanted. To disarm you, to make you feel pity, compassion. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally seeing beyond the anger, beyond the story I've told myself for all these years." "And the documents? The evidence we collected about the corruption during the dictatorship? The deaths at the Regent's Plaza construction? The forced evictions? Give it all to the public prosecutor's office," she replied firmly. "Report the crimes, but leave my name out of it, and leave Vincent out of the public eye. Let justice take its legal course, not through the court of public opinion." Richard sighed heavily. "You really care about him?" "It wasn't a question. I can't explain it, Richard. It doesn't make sense, even to me. But yes, somehow I care. I hope you know what you're doing, Isadora. And I hope you don't regret it." "Me too." In the 6th hour, Robert surprised Isadora by offering her a coffee. She accepted, grateful for the gesture that, however small, seemed like a hesitant first step towards some kind of truce. "Did he really look for you?" Robert asked, sitting next to her. "After my mother died?" Isadora nodded. "From what I've been able to confirm, yes. There are detailed reports from private investigators, spanning almost 2 decades, and letters. Dozens of letters he wrote to me without knowing if he'd ever deliver them." Robert shook his head, absorbing the information. "He never told me. Never mentioned he had another daughter. Maybe because he didn't know how you would react. Or maybe because it was too painful to admit that particular failure. I always knew he had affairs. My mother knew, too. It was a tacit agreement between them. Discretion in exchange for stability." Robert looked at the coffee cup in his hands. "But a child? That's different." "Half-sister," Isadora corrected softly. "To you, I'm a half-sister." Robert looked up, studying her with a curiosity he hadn't shown before. "You look like her, you know, like my mother. There's something in the eyes. The way you hold your head. It's strange." Isadora felt a shiver run down her spine. "What was she like?" she asked, genuinely curious. Despite having seen photos, having read the diary, Clara Lancaster remained a mystery to her. Fragile on the outside, strong on the inside. Robert smiled faintly, lost in memory. She played the piano like no one else. She'd read poetry aloud to me before I went to sleep. And she loved my father, despite everything. Loved him in a way I never fully understood. And did he love her? In his own way, yes. Vincent was never good at showing affection. But when she died, something broke inside him. He was never the same. At that moment, the doors to the operating theatre opened and Dr. Matthews appeared, still in his surgical gown, his face marked by fatigue. Isadora and Robert stood up simultaneously, approaching with apprehension. "We managed to control the leak and clip the aneurysm," the doctor announced, a slight smile breaking his exhausted expression. The surgery was a success considering the circumstances. Isadora felt her legs weaken with relief. Robert placed a hand on her shoulder, an instinctive gesture of support that surprised her. "Is he going to live?" she asked, her voice choked. "The next 48 hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic. He's a stubborn man, and that might work in his favor right now." "When can we see him?" Robert asked. "He's being moved to the ICU. Once he's stable, we'll allow brief visits, one person at a time." The doctor placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "Go home, take a shower, get some rest. He probably won't wake up until tomorrow with the sedation." But neither Isadora nor Robert went home. They remained at the hospital, taking turns for brief visits to the ICU, where Vincent lay motionless, connected to machines, his head partially shaved and bandaged. His face, normally marked by harsh lines of expression, seemed softened by the artificial sleep, almost peaceful. The next morning, as the sedation began to wear off, it was Isadora who was by his side. She watched intently for the first signs of consciousness, the slight flutter of his eyelids, his fingers twitching faintly on the sheet. "Vincent," she called softly, holding his hand. "You're in the hospital." The surgery was a success. "You're going to be okay." Slowly, with visible effort, he opened his eyes. For a few moments he seemed disoriented, confused. Then his gaze met hers and recognition flooded his pupils. "Isa." His voice was a hoarse, almost inaudible whisper. "I'm here," she replied, gently squeezing his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." He tried to say something else, but the words wouldn't come. Frustrated, he made an effort to lift his free hand, pointing to his own mouth, then to her. "Do you want me to call the nurse? Are you thirsty?" Vincent shook his head negatively with effort. He tried again, pointing at her, then at himself. You," Isadora translated, trying to understand. "Us?" He nodded weakly, his gaze intense, urgent. "Daughter," he finally managed to say, the word coming out like a sigh. Isadora felt tears burn her eyes. "Yes," she replied, her voice choked. "I am your daughter." A fragile smile formed on Vincent's lips, and a single tear trickled from the corner of his eye. "Forgive me," he whispered, before exhaustion overcame him again, pulling him back into sleep. In the weeks that followed, Vincent's recovery was slow but steady. There were complications, a minor infection, episodes of temporary confusion, speech difficulties that, according to the doctors, might be permanent due to minor brain damage from the initial leak. But he survived. And day by day he regained a little more of his strength, his lucidity. Isadora rarely left his side. She temporarily set aside her role as a nurse, allowing the hospital staff to handle the technical aspects, and simply took on the role of a daughter. She talked to him during the hours he was conscious, read to him when fatigue overcame him, held his hand during painful procedures. Robert was also present, more than Isadora would have expected. Initially distant and formal, he gradually relaxed his defensive posture. He took the DNA test he had demanded, confirming what was already evident to everyone. Isadora was, indeed, Vincent's biological daughter. One afternoon, while Vincent slept after a particularly grueling physical therapy session, Robert found Isadora in the hospital cafeteria. "We need to talk about the future," he said, sitting down across from her. Isadora nodded, bracing herself for what she anticipated would be a tense discussion about inheritance, legal rights, possibly even threats of a legal challenge. "I've cancelled the conservatorship proceedings," he continued, surprising her. "And I spoke with Dr. Harold about the new will my father wanted to make." "Robert, I'm not after his money," Isadora began. "I know," he interrupted, holding up a hand. "I've realized that in the past few weeks. If you were, you would have acted very differently." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The fact is, my father wanted to change his will to include significant donations to charity. And now I imagine to include you as well. That's not necessary. It's not a question of what's necessary. It's a question of what's fair." Robert adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture strangely reminiscent of Vincent. "For years I resented you. I imagined you as a rival, a threat, someone my father was searching for in secret, while ignoring the son who was right in front of him. I never wanted to take your place. I know that now." He smiled faintly. The irony is that from what I see in the way he looks at you, the way he holds your hand, you've achieved in weeks what I tried to get my entire life. His approval, his genuine affection. There was bitterness in his words, but also a resigned acceptance. Isadora felt a sudden compassion for this man who, like her, bore the scars of loving Vincent Lancaster. He loves you too, Robert. In his own complicated, imperfect way, but he loves you. Maybe. But there were always conditions, expectations. There was always disappointment in his eyes when he looked at me, as if I was never good enough. Robert shrugged. With you it's different. You're his redemption, the second chance he always wanted. It's not fair to put that weight on me. No, it's not. I'm sorry. He took a deep breath, composing himself. What I'm trying to say is that I won't contest the changes to the will. In fact, I'll support them. Because despite everything, I want him to have this. The peace of knowing he did the right thing, at least once. Isadora reached her hand across the table, briefly touching his. Thank you, Robert. I know this isn't easy. No, it's not. But maybe this is a second chance for me, too. To be better than I was, better than he was. The next morning, a lawyer came to the hospital. In a small ceremony in the ICU with Isadora, Robert, and Dr. Matthews as witnesses, Vincent signed the new will. His hands trembled so much that Isadora had to help him hold the pen, but his signature, though frail, was legible and legal. After everyone had left, Vincent asked Isadora to stay. He was stronger now, able to speak in short sentences, though his diction was still impaired by the mild stroke he had suffered during the surgery. You could have... Let me die, he said with effort, each word precisely articulated. It would have been fair. No, she replied, adjusting the pillow under his head. It wouldn't have been fair. It would have just been another tragedy, another loss. Why did you stay? After you found out. The truth? It was the question she had asked herself countless times in recent weeks. Why hadn't she left after the revelation? Why had she remained by the side of this man who had caused her mother so much suffering? Because I needed to understand, she finally answered. I needed to see beyond the monster I imagined my whole life. I needed to know the real man, with all his flaws, his contradictions, so that I could maybe one day forgive him. And so I could forgive myself for missing him, even without ever having known him. Vincent closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his wrinkled cheek. I don't deserve you. It's not a matter of deserving, she replied softly. It's a matter of choosing, and I choose to try. I choose to give us both a chance. He opened his eyes, gazing at her with an intensity that transcended his physical fragility. Isa, his voice broke, choked with emotion. May I call you daughter? The request, so simple and yet so profound, struck Isadora in a place she didn't even know existed inside her, an empty, aching space that had waited her whole life to be filled by this word, by this recognition. Yes, she replied, tears now flowing freely. You can call me daughter. Vincent smiled, a smile that lit up his tired face, that momentarily erased decades of bitterness and suffering. My daughter, he said, savoring each syllable as if it were the sweetest of words. My daughter. And in that moment, in the silence of that hospital room, something was completed. It wasn't a fairy tale happy ending. There was still much to be said, much to be resolved, much to be forgiven. But it was a beginning that neither of them had ever imagined possible. 3 months later, on a sunny morning that had completely dispelled the usual Glenmore fog, Isadora walked slowly through the gardens of Lancaster Manor. Beside her, leaning on a cane but considerably stronger than any doctor had predicted, Vincent watched with satisfaction the changes in their surroundings. The rose garden had been restored. The windows, once permanently shut, now let in light and air. The swimming pool, abandoned for decades, was being refurbished. The house, which had once been a mausoleum of painful memories, was slowly transforming into a home. Robert is coming for dinner tonight, Vincent commented, stopping to rest on a stone bench. He's bringing his girlfriend. Isadora smiled, happy for the small but significant evolution in the relationship between father and son. Since the surgery, since the changes to the will that guaranteed each of them a fair share of the inheritance, with a significant portion going to charitable foundations, Robert had begun to lower his defenses. He visited more, spoke more openly, Tried to build a relationship that wasn't based solely on obligation or self-interest. "It's good to see him moving forward," she said, sitting beside her father. "Yes, I think he's finally understood that he doesn't need to impress me, doesn't need to be what I expect. He can just be." There was a new softness to Vincent, a kindness that emerged more and more frequently from beneath the residual layers of his once uncompromising personality. The near-death experience, the reconciliation with the daughter he never knew, the slow rebuilding of his relationship with his son. All of it was changing him day by day. "And you?" he asked, studying her with that piercing gaze that age and illness had not managed to diminish. "Have you decided about Richard's proposal?" Richard had reappeared in their lives weeks ago, no longer as an accomplice in a revenge plot, but as a journalist interested in documenting the story of a father and daughter's reconciliation. He had proposed writing a book, not a sensationalist exposé, but an honest account, with all the complexities and contradictions of their journey. "I'm still thinking about it," Isadora replied. "I'm not sure I want to expose our story like that. It feels too private." "I understand, but perhaps it could help other people. Other broken families trying to find their way back to each other." Isadora smiled, surprised once again by this new Vincent, capable of thinking beyond himself, beyond his own interests. "I'll consider it," she promised, "but only if you're completely comfortable with the idea. What I did in the past, the mistakes I made, they can't be erased, Isadora. And maybe they shouldn't be. Maybe they're part of who we are, of how we got here." She nodded thoughtfully. There were still days when the anger returned, when the memories of her difficult childhood, of her mother destroyed by depression, weighed on her heart. There were still moments when she questioned her decision to stay, to try to build a relationship with this man who had caused so much suffering. But there were also days like today, days when the sun shone, when the roses bloomed again, when her father looked at her with a love so evident, so genuine, that it healed something deep inside her. "Isadora?" Vincent called, interrupting her thoughts. "Yes? Thank you. For what?" "For not giving up. For giving me a second chance I didn't deserve. For teaching me that it's never too late to try to be, not a better man perhaps, but at least a less bad one." Isadora took his hand, the hand that had once built and destroyed empires, that had signed documents that changed people's fates, that now trembled slightly with age and illness. She felt its fragility, its humanity, and in her heart something expanded, not complete forgiveness, not yet, but understanding, acceptance, and yes, something very much like love. "Let's go inside," she said, helping him to his feet. "It's getting chilly out here." Together, father and daughter walked slowly back to the manor. It was not an ending. It was just a chapter in a story that would continue to unfold, with all its